While I was on my deathbed, my parents were at a concert watching their most beloved adopted daughter, Helen, perform. Right there, James, holding flowers, got down on one knee. "Helen, will you marry me?" Amidst the applause and cheers, they kissed and embraced. At last, they became a family, and I took my last breath. I spent my whole life competing with Helen, fighting for everything, only to end up alone and bitter. But I was their real daughter. If I could start over, I'd stay away from them. "Dad, Mom, I don't need your love anymore. I've been reborn." Next to me, my parents are holding 11-year-old Helen's shoulders, smiling warmly at the cameras. Tomorrow's headline news: renowned musician adopts late friend's daughter, a true act of kindness. What's done is done, and it's all too late. Helen is the daughter of my parents' deceased friends, a musical prodigy with a congenital heart defect. Her parents tried desperately to heal her, but an accident left her alone. Her tragedy made my parents pity her, and they decided to care for her, eventually forgetting that I was their real daughter. "Molly, didn't you always say it's boring being alone? Now you have a sister to keep you company, aren't you happy?" They all smiled, assuming I'd be thrilled with this new sister, so thoughtful. In my previous life, I truly believed as they did. I thought I gained a companion and treated the seemingly frail Helen as my family, never noticing Helen stealthily taking everything that should have been mine until she'd completely replaced me. Snapping back to reality, Dad was still rambling. "Helen is ill. As her sister, you must take good care of her and protect her." "Got it." The next second, Helen's eyes started to well with tears. What if my sister isn't used to having someone else take Mom and Dad's love? Who would be that generous, right? "Don't worry, Uncle, Aunt, I was okay, in the orphanage." I often wonder if Helen was born to act. At 10, she plays the victim perfectly, subtly making me the villain. I hadn't even said anything, and she implied I was small-minded. As expected, Mom softened immediately, holding her tenderly. "Helen, don't overthink, you are our family." Dad also held Helen's tiny hand warmly, saying, "Right, from now on, our home is your home, we are your parents." With tears streaming down, Helen looked like a sad yet sweet child. "Thank goodness, I finally have a family, boo-hoo," she whimpered, burying deeper into Mom's arms. The cold winter wind howled, and everyone was moved by this display of warmth and family. Dad, Mom, and Helen huddled close, like a family reunited after so long. While I stood on the side, feeling like an outsider. Helen's genius is she manages to steal focus without a sound, becoming the center of attention. At home, my parents asked me to show Helen around. They had us share a room, splitting my princess bed in half for her. Just like their love, now divided. I began plotting my escape from this home Helen would use as her stage. I knew from before, once Helen arrived, my parents and childhood friend James fell into her orbit. I was cast as her adversary, their common enemy. As I mused about the future, Helen suddenly shrieked, falling from a step, clutching her chest in pain.
"Ah!"
My heart hurt so much, she cried desperately. Startled, my parents rushed over. They picked her up, visibly panicked. "Helen, hang on, we'll get you to a hospital," they fretted, holding Helen close. "Mom, Dad, maybe I should go back? My sister might not like me," she murmured through tears. My heart skipped at those words. Next, Dad's face turned stormy as he pulled me downstairs, accusing, "What did you do? How could you be so mean? Helen's so ill, and she lost her family. You bullied her. Enough, Helen's health is priority. We're heading to the hospital." Mom cradled Helen and left without a look my way. I felt hopeless, wishing my parents weren't so blinded by their kindness. How could I have pushed Helen from such a distance? If she was truly in cardiac distress, how could she act the victim so perfectly? They blamed me without giving a chance to explain. Taking Helen away, leaving me home alone and hungry. Mom used to have dinner with me and tuck me in before leaving. Now, they only saw Helen, forgetting I needed love and care, that I got hungry, cold, afraid of being alone. I gradually realized, after Helen arrived, the obedient and sweet daughter title passed to her, turning me into a bad child who didn't share. Helen's strategy was acting weak, tugging at my kind-hearted parents' sympathy, leaving me burdened with guilt that had nothing to do with me. Their disappointment in me piled up. I couldn't accept it, so I started competing with Helen, always trying to beat her. But Helen was just too good at playing the victim. To everyone else, she was the sweet, innocent child who everyone adored. She got praise like nobody's business. Everyone knew that in the music scene, there were parents with a genius adopted daughter, Helen. She was delicate yet strong while I seemed invisible to them. To them, I was just a plain, unremarkable nobody. But I was competitive. I spent my life trying to outdo Helen, only to end up losing everything. I lay in a cold hospital room, taking my last breath. She stole my parents' love, and even James, who used to be my closest friend, fell for her at first sight. In this life, I've decided not to repeat the same mistakes. I'm going to live for myself. The next morning, laughter and chatter from downstairs woke me up. It was my birthday. Just a few days ago, my parents said they'd plan something nice and take me out for a fancy meal. Stepping out of my room, I saw Helen sitting on the sofa, surrounded by Mom and Dad. She was wearing my favorite princess dress. That was my 12th birthday gift from my mom. When they saw me, the laughter stopped, as if I was an uninvited guest ruining their happy moment. Mom had a forced smile on her face. Seeing that I noticed the dress, she quickly explained, "Molly, Helen really likes that dress. As her older sister, why don't you give it to her? I'll buy you a new one later." Standing on the stairs, I looked down at them, feeling nothing. I said, "It's just a birthday gift, as long as you guys are happy." As soon as I spoke, everyone seemed to catch on to my underlying meaning. Dad's expression turned cold instantly. "Molly, it's just a dress. Why are you being so sarcastic?" He snapped. Mom seemed uncomfortable too, saying, "Molly, how can you say that? Apologize to your sister now. My birthday gift was given away, yet they made it seem like I was the one being mean." Maybe that's the power of favoritism. Whatever Helen does, she's never at fault. I'm always the problem. In my last life, I would have been heartbroken by their favoritism, locked myself in my room, and cried my eyes out. But now, I only managed a small smile. Looking at the leftovers on the table, everyone else had already had breakfast, except for me. So, did anyone remember it's my birthday today? My parents froze. They clearly forgot. Oh, yesterday we were so busy taking Helen to the doctor we didn't notice the date. "Molly, don't be upset. I'll buy you a cake right now," Mom rushed to say, trying to ease the awkwardness, covering up that she forgot her own daughter because of Helen. Dad, however, didn't like my questioning attitude. He tossed the remote onto the glass coffee table, which made a sharp noise. "You should have reminded us yesterday. We're so busy all the time. You're spoiled, thinking you're the center of the world, and everyone should revolve around you. It's just a birthday, there's always next year. It's not as important as Helen's health. We'll take you out for a meal later." Even if I reminded them yesterday, they would have only cared about making it up to fragile Helen. If it were the old me, Dad's words would have crushed me. I would have cried and thrown a fit, earning the label of being difficult and ungrateful. But now, I felt nothing. I calmly walked down the stairs and, feeling sentimental, looked up. I saw Helen with a small smirk and a flash of satisfaction in her eyes. The next second, she frowned as if she were about to cry. "Dad, please don't blame my sister. It's my fault. I shouldn't have gotten sick, shouldn't have worn her dress, and made her upset. I'll go back to the orphanage. You celebrate Molly's birthday. I'll always remember how good you and Mom were to me and repay you when I grow up." After hearing her words, my parents were clearly moved. What an understanding little girl. Despite all she's been through, she's still so kind and gentle, not like spoiled me, who grew up in comfort and lacks empathy. The three of them hugged again, acting like I didn't exist at all. In my last life, I tried so hard to win back my parents' love, but only fell into Helen's traps, growing more distant from them. It's not that my parents didn't love me. Their love was just so weak that a few of Helen's false words could steal their attention, swapping their real daughter for their adopted one. If it could be taken away, then maybe it wasn't really mine. In this life, I refuse to waste my energy on this twisted love. But I will let Helen know that everything she schemed to get is meaningless to me. My parents and even James, whom she took from me, are just passing characters in my life now. My parents took me and Helen to a nearby restaurant. As the food arrived, lobster, sea cucumber, and crab, oh, all seafood. But I'm allergic to seafood. "Molly, you know Helen needs good nutrition because she's not in great health. Be a good sister and let it slide," Mom urged, worried I'd make a scene and attract unwanted attention. So this was all Helen's favorite food, compromise and let it slide. These words became all too familiar since she came along. I was sick of hearing them. Throughout lunch, Mom kept putting food on Helen's plate, and Dad watched them lovingly, hardly glancing my way. I ate mechanically, devoid of flavor, and afterward, the plan was to fulfill my long-held wish of going to the amusement park. But a call about Helen's school enrollment changed everything, and they left me behind. Is it my birthday today or hers? I finally couldn't hold it in and wanted to ask if my parents realized how biased they were. Molly, you can celebrate your birthday every year, but this opportunity is rare for Helen. Be good, and next time, we promise to celebrate your birthday properly. Mom's voice was gentle, but her words were all about Helen, as if there was no room for discussion. Every time something conflicted with Helen, Mom comforted me this way, but I never got the compensation she promised. Sis, I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't go for this class? Helen started to cry pitifully again, causing our parents to get all sympathetic. Dad shot me a cold look, as if I were the biggest enemy of the family. It's just a birthday, don't be so dramatic. We already took you out for a meal. What more do you want? Why do you have so many demands? Can't you be more like Helen? She's younger and gets it more than you do, but when it came to Helen's birthday, Mom and Dad took her to a 5-star hotel, threw a big party, and invited everyone influential in the music scene. They dressed her up like a princess and seemed eager to introduce her to everyone. They left with Helen without looking back. Helen slyly looked over her shoulder and gave me a challenging smile, as if to say, "See, your parents are so easy for me to steal away." I ignored her and walked home by myself, finally letting go of all my hopes. Once I got back, I cleared out my old room and moved into the guest room. Not to please Helen, but because I wanted the peace and quiet to focus on my studies. To get out of this house as soon as possible, parents took Helen out, who knows where. They returned later and seemed even pleased that I willingly gave up my room. If only you'd been this sensible earlier. We always knew you're a good daughter at heart. We know you like this. We went to great lengths to get it. We hope you'll keep this attitude and get along with Helen. Okay, Mom took out a brand new limited edition princess dress. It was a gift my past self had only dreamed of getting. She placed it in my arms and patted my head. That kind of tenderness reminded me of the days before Helen came into our lives. Back then, I'd have been thrilled to get their approval. But now, it sounded different. Only by putting Helen first was I worthy of reward. Helen wasn't satisfied with me just giving up the room. Her eyes couldn't hide their envy when she saw the limited edition dress. Soon she stood in front of us clutching the dress, tears streaming down her face like pearls. I felt a wave of bad premonition. Before, she would act and cry her way into getting my birthday presents. And now, she opened her small hand to reveal the dress, shredded into pieces, with the sleeves and hem dangling off. Sis, I know you don't like me, but the dress didn't do anything wrong. How could you take your anger out on it? It wasn't me. Instinctively, I tried to clear my name. Dad wouldn't even hear me out. He snatched the dress from my arms and handed it to Helen. I thought you'd finally learned better, but you've just bottled it up. We got you a new dress and you went and ruined Helen's? You're still so petty. Mom looked at me disappointedly. Molly, you're becoming more headstrong. We work all day and take care of you and your sister, and you can't even try to be like Helen? More understanding. I'd had enough and finally asked what I'd always wanted to know. I didn't do it. Why do you always believe a stranger over your own daughter? Instead of a reply, Dad angrily slapped me, pointing at my nose, because Helen is sweet, obedient, and likable, and you're not. How could you compare? Would Helen ruin something she loves? You made a mistake and can't own up to it. After they shielded Helen like she was some kind of precious treasure, she wiped away her tears and acted all innocent. Mom and Dad, don't be mad at sis. I shouldn't have wanted her dress. I just never saw something so pretty at the orphanage. Sister, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Mom and Dad bent down, comforting her softly, glaring at me to apologize to Helen. Helen is being magnanimous not to hold it against you, but you, as her sister, can't even accept her? Apologize to Helen, you're just spoiled by us. Seeing them united with Helen against me, I felt like the outsider, adopted and alone, facing a cold and absurd reality. Remember this, I didn't do anything wrong. I will not apologize. Ignoring Helen's smug look, I went straight to my room, locked the door, and shut out Dad's furious yelling, Mom's heavy sighs, and Helen's sobs. Both past and present, nothing changed. Even when I wanted nothing with Helen, I ended up caught in her little show, making my parents dislike me more and more. While they took Helen out to enjoy the park until sunset, Before, I might have been devastated and considered running away. But now, I calmly sat with my vocabulary book, quietly studying. In this second chance at life, with 27 years of experience, I aced all my finals, ranking first in the entire grade. I won first place in every academic competition I entered. With these honors, I earned a full scholarship for high school and a $1,000 scholarship. Helen, on the other hand, failed miserably, scoring below everyone even a few spots above the bottom. Mom and Dad paid much money to get her into a decent school. Yet, they never blamed her. Instead, they comforted her by putting me down. I bet if it weren't for Helen's health issues, she would have done way better than her. Worst case scenario, your parents could always sign you up for more tutoring classes. Exactly. With Helen's massive musical talent, she's gonna be a musician someday. You can't compare her to some bookworm buried in books. Sometimes, I really can't wrap my head around why there are parents out there who are so biased, they might as well be on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. For Helen, they were all about caring and patience. But for me, their own daughter who's the top of the school, they couldn't care less. To the point where, just to keep me from feeling hurt, they ordered me to stay in my room those days. Honestly, I didn't mind. No one bugging me meant I could focus on my studies more. But Helen's curse never let up. Whenever I started reviewing, that annoying piano sound would blare from next door. Once again, they chose the special music path for Helen. Stepping out of my room, I found the three of them discussing something by the piano room. When they saw me, they all paused like I was some outsider they had to hide from. Is Big Sis mad because my piano playing is too loud? Helen asked, looking all sad at her hands. If it upsets you, I guess I'll just stop playing. Mom's eyes grew soft, and she looked at me with words she seemed to hold back, before finally speaking up. Molly, your sister's not in great health and needs to stay home. You can study at a library nearby. Hand over your room to Helen. I found it laughable. I was getting kicked out of my own home, just because of Helen. In my past life, I fought with her, wanting to study music too, wanting to play piano. It caused endless family feuds. And in the end, Helen sat in my room, playing my piano, taught gently by our parents, cradled with love, playing duets with them. Me, a 12-year-old kid, had no choice but to take the bus every day to a piano room 5 miles away. Every piece she played was carefully recorded by parents on expensive phonographs. All I got were pity recordings on my phone. Every single time, Helen's requests meant I had to step back. No one cared about my feelings. Once, both Helen and I took part in a music college entrance competition. Halfway through, Helen claimed she had a heart attack and couldn't finish the timed piece. So she straight up submitted one of my compositions from my computer. The judges doubted the style similarity, sparking attention online. I tried telling the truth to the organizers, but my parents beat me to it, publicly claiming it was Helen's original piece. They comforted the tear-streaked Helen but ignored my breakdown, warning me not to be aggressive. Molly, just give Helen what she wants. Sisters should share, after all. Helen's been frail since young. Have some compassion. It's not like she does this on purpose. Do you really want to push her to despair? Why must I always yield? Is it not enough that she took my parents from me? Now she wants my future too. They turned things black and white but knew nothing about how long I'd practiced, how many nights I'd spent perfecting a piece, only to have all that effort dismissed with a few words. My frustrations never drew any sympathy from my parents. Instead, Dad angrily pushed me down. Why shout? If it weren't for Helen's condition, you think she'd care for your mediocre stuff? You think you have any talent for music? Going to music school is just wasting resources. Mom shook her head with disappointment. Molly, you're being hurtful. Where's your upbringing? From then on, I carried the shame of being labeled a plagiarizer, infamous in music circles, mocked for not being as talented as an adopted sibling with a heart condition, effectively blacklisted. Meanwhile, Helen basked in fame and fortune through reviews of her genius, beloved by critics and audiences alike, getting into a prestigious music school. Reborn, I tossed the piano room key to the floor. Do whatever makes you happy. Without looking back, I stormed out even as I knew my parents would sigh over my rebelliousness, and Helen would smile at her success, but I wasn't about to waste energy glancing back. Forward, that's all I could focus on. But even when I stopped fighting, Helen's curse lingered. If I refused to yield, my parents threatened to cut my allowance. Luckily, being reborn meant I never counted on parents under Helen's spell. I had saved over the years, from New Year's money and contest winnings, adding up to about $3,000. Seeing no impact shook my parents, making them think I had schemes, challenging them openly. "You think we won't kick you out? Let's see how arrogant you are then." I coolly showed them the laws protecting minors. That shut them right up, leaving them to nitpick, accusing me of rebellion and disobedience. But I'd long gotten used to their impotent rages, one in, one out. As winter break approached, James came home for the holidays from abroad. In my previous life, I'd hoped my heavily biased parents would have driven me to despair, hoping James, who always said he'd protect me, would side with me. But the moment he met Helen, he fell hard. James came to my place looking for me but stumbled upon an unsteady Helen, clutching her heart. She leaned into him, pale face, teary-eyed, looking like some fragile jasmine flower, triggering his need to protect. He started taking her to gatherings, introducing her to his friends, completely forgetting the engagement two families had in mind with me. Helen would subtly showcase faint bruises on her arms. Once James noticed and she feigned embarrassment, saying, "No, it's nothing." Next time, "James, you should really bring big sis. You two grew up together after all." James got all worried when he heard her and quickly declared, "Helen, if anyone bullies you, I'll make sure they deal with me first." He rushed over with a little white flower, angrily asking me, "Molly, when did you become so unfair? Helen is such a nice girl. Why are you picking on her? Unfair. Please, you guys can't see anything else." Once Helen drops a couple of tears. I crossed my arms and looked coldly at James, who was eager to play the knight in shining armor. "Why don't you ask what exactly I did that upset her? Was it giving up my dress, my bedroom, or the music room to her? Or maybe because at my birthday party, all the dishes were her favorite seafood?" Helen's face turned red as I listed everything, and she nervously twisted her fingers, afraid James might catch on. But to James, it looked like I was subtly threatening, and that Helen was just being patient to avoid conflict. Seeing Helen all frazzled and upset, James got really mad and shouted at me, "You're just jealous because I've taken Helen to a few gatherings. The engagement stuff was just a childhood joke. I never liked you. Don't pick on her again, or you'll regret it." In my past life, hearing these harsh words from James, who used to do anything for me, broke my heart. I couldn't eat for days and was determined to outshine Helen to prove myself. But now, I know people like them belong together. I just want them to never come across anyone else. I walked away without looking back, but from the corner of my eye, I saw James carefully comforting Helen in his arms. Probably worried I might harm Helen, James took a year off from his studies abroad just to stay and protect his sweetheart. But before the new school year started, I applied to live on campus. I couldn't wait to leave that cold-hearted home. Being born again and acing my studies, I completed 3 years worth of junior high school in one go and skipped straight to high school. The principal, impressed with my grades, made an exception and waived my tuition and boarding fees. The high school is the top academic school in the city with a competitive class system. The workload and pressure are way more than in junior high. I've got to work hard to stay in the honors class. After sorting out my living arrangements, I dove headfirst into my studies. I thought moving out means Helen would settle down, but she didn't. Even though the junior and high school buildings aren't close, one day, I saw her in my classroom. "Sis, it's been a while since school started, and you haven't called home. Mom and Dad said they wouldn't give you pocket money, but that's just talk." I've tried to calm them down. "They're really worried about you, Larry." Helen deliberately spoke loudly. In no time, everyone was staring at us. Helen looked all dolled up while I was just plain. Her words were misleading, making it seem like she was the family's real daughter and I was some ungrateful foster kid. Some students who already disliked me for skipping grades seized the moment. "Molly's so ungrateful, isn't she? Who treats their parents like that? Her younger sister is more mature, she's only good at academics, not at dealing with people. Does she think she's all that?" I frowned, about to say something, but Larry, my desk mate, cut through the chatter. "Quiet down, if you're all so bored, go home. Don't disturb those who want to study." Silence fell. No one dared to speak because he was not only the top student but also the student council president. Nobody wanted to be written up by him. Seeing her plan fail, Helen stomped off, pretending she was having a heart attack. I gave Larry a grateful nod and whispered, "Thanks." He nodded slightly and slid his notes to me. I got the hint and smiled. Larry isn't very chatty, and many think he's stern and stiff. But being close to him and in the same league team, I've gotten to know him better over time. He's actually a nice guy. When you ask him questions, he's patient and thorough. He just isn't great at small talk. Helen put Larry in my camp after that day. Everything I have, she wants to take. So she went on aggressively chasing Larry, but whether it's milk or gold, Larry refused it all like an icy fortress. After failing multiple times, she finally backed off. Thinking she'd finally give up, I focused on preparing for the school competition. Just as Larry and I left the library for dinner, Helen jumped out, with our parents who I hadn't seen in ages behind her. They showed up daily to pick up their precious foster daughter, but never once glanced at their biological one in the same school. Pointing at Larry and me, she loudly exclaimed, "Mom, Dad, look, she's in a relationship, always hanging out with this guy." Dad and Mom blew their tops, accusing me of having no morals and saying I should be sent to a tough love camp. They even threatened to speak with the teachers to straighten out the school environment. The crowd grew, and people began to whisper about Larry and me. Helen shot me a wicked smile. I pulled out my phone and opened a picture I had taken by chance after school. In it, Helen and James were embracing and kissing under a streetlight. My parents were too shocked to speak. This, my mom stammered, glaring between Helen and me. I let out an understanding smile and said, "Just like you saw, the one puppy loving is your adopted daughter." Helen was so mad she was shaking, ready to slap me, screaming, "You little brat." "Just you wait." Larry grabbed her and stood between us. With everyone staring, she realized she'd lost her cool. The next second, she put on this teary-eyed act. "Sorry, Mom and Dad. I shouldn't have tried to ask James how to make my runaway sister happy." "But sis, why are you so sneaky, even taking misleading photos? If James doesn't like you, is that why you're mad at me? Since you hate me, I guess I should just leave. It's all my fault. I just wanted a mom and dad so badly, and I forgot who the real daughter is here." Her tears streamed down, looking as pitiful as she could muster, but it made me want to puke. My parents, though, were heartbroken. The moment they saw her crying, they forgot everything and just consoled her. "Helen, don't cry. We know it's not your fault. We know James. He's just a brother. It's not strange to hug or hold hands with a brother." Molly twisted everything. "It's her mistake, and Molly, if you want to fall, don't drag your sister down with you, sweetheart, let's not lower ourselves to her level." I wasn't interested in watching their little family drama anymore and left with Larry. Helen's pathetic act only fooled my parents. I didn't even care. But word got to the principal. When I opened the office door, I heard Larry calling the principal Mom. That's when it hit me, Larry was the principal's son. I intended to explain everything, but it seemed like she already knew. She just patted my shoulder and told me to focus on my studies. I glanced at Larry, he must have explained everything to her. Later, I found out the principal gave Helen a warning for spreading lies. If she did it again, she'd be expelled. This kept Helen and my parents from causing more trouble. Just like the principal said, for me, what mattered was studying. With hard work, I won a gold medal in a competition. My grades stayed in the top 3 in the class, sometimes surpassing Larry to grab the top spot. I was getting closer to my dreams. To reward my progress, the principal took me out for a meal. Larry tagged along too. "Molly, you're proactive, ambitious, resilient, with so many great qualities. You're a treasure to be cherished. Honestly, I felt a connection with you the moment I saw you. Your parents might not recognize you, but I'd love to have you as my goddaughter. We could be family." What do you think? Her heartfelt words provided a warmth I hadn't felt in ages, like finding a safe haven during a storm. I didn't cry when Helen framed me or when my parents blamed me, but now I felt a lump in my throat, tears welling up. Larry seemed uncharacteristically awkward. She doesn't need to be a goddaughter to be family. The principal went to pay the bill, and Larry and I stayed put. We saw Helen, holding James's hand, approaching with my parents behind them. It seemed they'd approved of Helen and James' relationship, swapping our engagement for her. Helen saw me, gasped, and hid behind James like I was a monster. Playing the role of a fragile bunny, she tugged at James's heartstrings, who immediately started yelling at me, "You pretended to be innocent, getting Helen in trouble, while you were out on dates with another guy." Tears in her eyes, Helen pleaded, "Sis, I shouldn't have been here to bother you. Please, don't tell the teachers bad things about me." My parents were pissed too, pointing at me, "Molly, you've really grown a pair, lying non-stop. You abandoned family for some guy, dragging Helen down. When will you wake up and be responsible, like your sister? The principal walked over, her face darkening when she saw Helen and the others. My parents were suddenly all smiles, nodding at the principal. Helen stepped forward, awkwardly chuckling. It was all a misunderstanding, even before. Sis, you're not going to hold a grudge, are you? In this new life, I already deleted files from my computer, and Helen's terrible audition cost her a spot at the music academy. Her grades weren't good enough to get into our top school, unless by the principal's mercy. Oh, principal. We're so grateful. Molly is lucky to have your favor. The principal, clearly unimpressed, replied coldly, Molly is excellent, on her own. Larry sneered at my shameless family, who only cared about appearances. Molly won a gold medal representing the school, and topped the midterms. Did you know any of this? My parents were stunned, too focused on Helen to notice my achievements. James, unimpressed with Helen lowering herself, looked at us like enemies, snapping, if she doesn't say, who's gonna know? Besides, what's the point of good grades? You'll end up working for someone else. I've got enough money to take care of Helen forever, I calmly interrupted. You care more about Helen than she cares for herself. Growing up, her cry for help would bring everyone running, yet no one brought me a glass of water when I had a fever. There's a lot more. Are these all my faults? Everybody fell silent. My parents hung their heads, maybe reconsidering their actions. Helen, seizing their guilt, unleashed a flood of tears and stumbled through her words. Sorry, sis, it's all my fault. If it weren't for my bad heart, maybe they wouldn't be so worried about me. Halfway through, she clutched her chest, dramatically squatting down in supposed agony. My parents instantly tossed me aside, focusing only on Helen again. After all, she's been their darling for so long, even a small bruise on her would break their hearts. You vile woman. You knew Helen has a heart condition and still made things hard for her. James yelled angrily, trying to knock me down. But as soon as he moved, Larry grabbed his arm and held it tightly. You've got such basic skills and still want to fight? Larry might look like a nerdy scholar, but he's actually a black belt in Taekwondo. The principal's gaze was icy, like a blade scanning the people gathered around Helen. You blame Molly for not coming home, saying she's cold-hearted, but now do you see why? It's all because of your favoritism. You twisted things unrelated to Molly into being her fault. She didn't look at my parents' reaction afterward, just marched us out of there. Worried I'd be hurt by my parents' behavior, she comforted me for a while. But I just smiled slightly and shook my head, showing none of their nonsense would bother me. With college entrance exams coming up, I couldn't let them distract me. I threw myself into studying and got accepted into Cambridge University with top scores. Thanks to my excellent academic record and the principal's recommendation letter, the university offered to cover my tuition and even granted me a first-class scholarship, plus I could easily earn money on the side for living expenses. When choosing my major, I only discussed it with the principal. After the acceptance results came out, I thought my controlling dad would seize the chance to chastise me. But for the first time ever, he called and spoke to me in the same gentle way he does with Helen, asking me to come home for dinner. Turns out, they'd blown the family savings on Helen's medical treatments and her private school. Helen's music talent had faded due to her laziness, and now even her academic performance was at risk. Casually, I asked, what about James? Didn't he say he could support Helen for life? All I heard on the phone was Helen crying. James had been forced by his family to study abroad. His family looked down on Helen and ordered them to break up. Initially, James resisted, but after his parents cut his funds for just a week, he caved and returned home. My family was deeply in debt. Knowing I earned a good amount working on projects, they hoped I'd cover the bottomless pit Helen created. For them, I was nothing but a source to exploit. Having long grown used to and tired of their snobbish attitudes, I sent them $200,000, telling them it covered my life expenses and pensions from them over the years, cutting ties thereafter. Since you've always treated Helen as your only child, I've fulfilled my legal obligations. From now on, let's stay out of each other's lives. Upon hearing this, my father's facade shattered, revealing his true nature as he roared like he'd been provoked. You ungrateful girl. Who needs your petty money? You've grown bold outside, cocky even and fine, then don't ever step foot in this house again. I said nothing more and hung up the phone. Despite claiming they didn't care, they accepted the transfer in seconds. No wonder Helen fits right into their family, they're just as two-faced as she is. Larry chose the same major and program as I did. After the college entrance exams, he confessed to me, and I said yes. I ranked first, he was second. Together, we joined a research lab and became a model couple there. One day, after wrapping up a project, we planned to grab a meal but almost got hit by a car crossing the street. It happened a few more times, as if someone was targeting me. Thankfully, my past life's car accident made me extraordinarily cautious about safety in this one. Then I spotted the same car that killed me in my former life among them. I knew it wasn't just coincidence. When I hired a detective to investigate, it turned out Helen was behind it. She wasn't satisfied with her fame and success in my past life, wanting me dead to feel at ease, so she hired a hitman disguised as a driver to stage an accident. In this life, she was so desperate that she acted ahead of time. I immediately had the lawyer compile evidence and reported it, holding Helen accountable for her crimes. As she was taken into the police car, Helen yelled, "Mom, Dad, help me. Make them let me go." Hoping her parents would clean up her mess like before, but now facing the law, there was no chance. They gripped my hands tightly, pleading, "Molly, please drop the charges. Helen was just momentarily impaired, and she's not well." I couldn't hold back any longer and interrupted, "So her poor health is justification for hijacking your lives and mine, huh?" They were at a loss for words, seemingly forgetting how to respond. This excuse has been her shield, a sword stabbing into me. Is there a trace of me in this house? Do you see a single photo of me on the wall full of pictures? Ever since Helen came, my smiles vanished from those walls, everything overtaken by her. With that, I left without looking back, while my parents stood in shock, disoriented. When they took Helen from the orphanage, reporters flocked for interviews. Now as she's put in jail, they faced another swarm of cameras. It was all triumph before, now it was nothing but disgrace. You reportedly cut ties with your biological daughter for your adoptive one. Thoughts on that? Do you regret this decision? My parents looked like they'd aged overnight, wrinkles and gray hairs covered them as they bent over, weeping into their hands. The favoritism spell they cast finally broke completely. We regret it, we've truly erred. But watching this on TV only made me feel deeply ironic. Behind me, I heard the principal and Larry's voices. "Molly, I made your favorite salted shrimp today, come try it." The principal warmly called. Larry added cheerfully, "Already peeled for you." I turned off the TV and walked toward them. Coming. Past events have blown away like dust, not worth rehashing. What's important is my life now, with two people who love me, forming a warm home. That's where my happiness begins.